All right, welcome everybody. I'm Mayor Nesh. Nice to see everybody here tonight. Nice to be here. We did this a couple of years ago at the library, and I think it was a moving experience for me and a lot of the participants that were here. We have a lot of our panel, some different names, some new ones here. We will have some representatives from Carrier Clinic, some folks that are in the drug court program, JFK Center for Behavioral Health, some graduates from the drug court program. We have some parent advocates, people who are going through this or have gone through this. We have a judge, Judge Jones from the drug court. We have our assistant prosecutor here from Middlesex County. So, and also we have our police officer here who runs their program, has been involved in that. So hopefully a lot of experts that can provide you some information tonight. Take that back home. We are recording this. It'll be available, I think, on the Observer's website and other venues. And the most important thing is, if you get something out of tonight, bring it home, talk with your friends, your family and relatives, and just bring this important topic to even greater light. I started, I think this last year, the last time we had this, with something that I found interesting at that time that had come out just a little bit before. And it was a piece of reporting that was done by Stephen Sterling from NewJersey.com. And he named the piece "Welcome to Heroin Town." And Heroin Town, unfortunately, would be New Jersey's largest city. So starting off tonight, I'm just going to read the introduction of this because I think it's very moving and important. If you haven't seen this piece, I urge you to take a look. You can Google it. You can Google New Jersey Heroin Town, and it'll come up there on there. So it's still available out there today. So it starts off, what would happen if you took everyone who was addicted to heroin in New Jersey and sent them to live in one place? Well, like I said, it would be the state's largest city, boasting a population of at least 128,000. Its residents are diverse enough that the town would be sufficient, self-sufficient, with lawyers, politicians, construction workers, teachers, and scientists walking the streets. And you will know one of them. In fact, social network analysis suggests that you'll likely know several city residents, whether they toll behind a desk behind you or sleep in a bed down the hall. The city exists across New Jersey, where heroin and opioid addiction have exploded in the past 10 years, killing more than 5,000 people and enslaving hundreds of thousands more. It is not a new story, but one with reaches far deeper into the card state than most know. And so what they did was they actually started out by reaching out to people and looking to hear their stories. And believe it or not, they've got several thousand responses back, and that's how they were able to put this piece of reporting together. So again, without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over now to Bob Jones from our state drug court. And Bob, take it away.
Thank you. Can everybody hear? I'm not sure. Push. This is okay. I thought I'd start out by telling everybody just a little bit about what the drug court is, because a lot of people don't understand or really know what it is. It's a diversionary program for people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol. The courts began the process back in, the program I should say, back in 2002. And it expanded because of legislation, actually bipartisan legislation. Both sides of the aisle saw the value in drug courts and the successes that were coming from drug courts, so they expanded the program over the past decade, really. What it is, it's an intense program. Participants are sentenced to what they call drug court, rather than going to state prison in many cases, and probably in most cases now. And they go through an intense program where they have to report to court once a week. They come see me once a week for me to see how they're doing on their progress. They see a probation officer once a week. They have a 10 p.m. curfew, and they have to call in by that time every day. They have to go to treatment. Sometimes that treatment can be 3 times a week, 1 time a week, up to 5 times a week. And that would be outpatient treatment. They also, some, depending upon the severity of their addiction, could also go to inpatient treatment. Sometimes 28 days, sometimes as long as almost 9 months. So it's a variety of treatment options that we have for the people who participate in the program. In addition to that, they have to attend AA, NA, or some other sober support meeting 3 times per week. And they're drug tested 3 times a week, sometimes even more than that, depending upon where they are in treatment. So what happened was the program was put in place because they found out that putting people in prison really wasn't the answer. The addictions weren't ending, and the crimes that were being caused by the addictions weren't ending. And I'll probably talk about that in just a little bit in a moment. But I thought what I would do is start out by setting the stage a little bit. Mayor Neshaw already did some of that, but I think when you listen to some of the numbers, they're sobering. In 2016, these are the most recent figures that we have, 64,000 people died from drug overdoses in our country. 64,000. 2 out of every 3 of those were from opioid overdoses. Now I heard that the 2017 numbers are coming out pretty soon, and I heard they may actually top 100,000 this year, which is sad. More people die each year from overdoses than die from car crashes, than die from gun violence. More people died last year from drug overdoses than died in the Vietnam War. So if you think about it, it's really a sobering set of statistics. Actually, the one that really gets to me is if you go and break it down by day, today 91 people will die from an overdose. And we also know that despite those numbers, the addiction rates are at an all-time high. And we also know that after treatment, that doesn't always do the trick. People relapse. I was just reading the other day about Whitney Houston actually went to rehab 4 different times. And you can see it didn't help, and she was going voluntarily. Hardcore addiction really requires multiple attempts at treatment in many cases, and even then it may not work. The other thing I wanted to say to people is that when people think about drug overdoses, what comes to mind? You picture an addict shooting in the street, or sticking a needle in their arm in an abandoned building. But that may have been the case many years ago, but that's changing, and it's changed significantly. The reality today is very, very different. Today's overdose victim could be the high school cheerleader who got injured at practice and then got hooked on oxycodone that was prescribed by her doctor. It could be a neighbor. I see this all the time. A construction worker who became addicted to painkillers because of maybe a back surgery or an injury at work, and then the prescriptions ran out, so they tried to get the prescriptions on the street, and then they realized that it was much cheaper to go to heroin and changed over to heroin because they had no money left to do otherwise. Or I've seen professionals. The mayor was talking about people, talk about lawyers and doctors and teachers. Now it could be somebody, they went and got their wisdom pulled and they couldn't stop taking the Percocets. So today the opioid epidemic really knows no boundaries. Age, race, income, gender, religion. And you may actually be surprised because this wasn't the case years ago. 4 out of 5 new heroin users started out by abusing prescription painkillers. Think about that number. 4 out of 5 people who are starting to use heroin came from prescription painkillers prescribed to them by a doctor. So with the crisis growing nationwide, the legal system is really turning to drug courts, and they're expanding nationwide. They're growing tremendously, and with good reason. The model substantially reduces recidivism. I can never say the word. I think as a judge I'd be able to say that. Recidivism while saving public funds. I want to share with you a couple numbers I just got this week. Because it shows that the drug courts do a much better job reducing crime than do prisons. Rearrest figures. Typically someone getting out of prison, the chances of being rearrested within 3 years, 53%. In New Jersey, if you're a drug court graduate, that number is 19%. If you're a drug court graduate in Middlesex County, like one of my speakers is right here, it's 12%. So you can see how those the difference that's happening because of drug court programs. They've been a huge success, and that's, quite frankly, why they're expanding. A couple more figures, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker. 91% of our graduates are employed when they graduate, and 69% have a job that gives them medical benefits. Think about someone getting out of prison. Most of them don't have that. In addition, statewide, and this number always kind of makes me smile. We've seen 602 drug-free babies, and that may not seem like a large number, but when you think about the babies that are born addicted, whether it's to a prescription drug or to heroin or whatever drug it happens to be, that's a huge number. The program works and it saves money because the cost to incarcerate are skyrocketing. We know, I was looking online today just to get a number, and it could cost up to $50,000, sometimes even more than that a year, to house somebody in prison. The drug court program is a much cheaper alternative, and it's actually a much more effective alternative for certain types of offenders. I'm not saying for everybody. So there is a lot happening in New Jersey to combat drug and alcohol addiction. The drug courts aren't the only thing. We've heard some really good news over the past couple of weeks with new things coming out. Our jail's getting some programs. There's some new advances in what's called MAT, medically assisted treatment. There are advances there. And there are things on the other end, too, the law enforcement end that I'm sure you'll hear about today. I did want to introduce, they'll be talking, I'm not sure what order they're going in, but I do have two people with me. One who graduated my drug court program yesterday, Nick Smith, he's right next to me. And the other is Emil Salvia, who's going to be graduating in May. Both of them have spoken before, and I think you'll find what they have to say very interesting. Thank you.
With that, we'll go right to your graduate and your current student. But tell us a little bit about, who is the drug court program for? What is your typical offender, and what excludes somebody from the drug court? Where are the barriers to those who aren't familiar with that?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you got to hold it close to your mouth.
All the way. Typically, they're third-degree offenders, some second-degree offenders. Typically, what the dividing line is they can't be a danger to the community if they're put into this high-intensity probation. That's the typical dividing line of who can be in it and who can't. They have to have, they go through a screening at the beginning with a substance abuse evaluator. And the substance abuse evaluator, because we have actually had people here on the panel who've had our participants as patients, will determine what type of abuse, what type of drug they're abusing, and the degree. So it could be, say for example, as heroin, just as an example. It could be mild, moderate, or severe. And then depending upon how they do in that evaluation, there's another evaluation that goes on, and that's when there's a determination made whether they'll be in the program or not.
Okay. Why don't we go to Nicholas Smith, who, as you mentioned, is one of your recent graduates.
Just pull it up closer.
I got it.
Thank you.
I really don't need this thing because I'm really loud. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Nicholas Smith. I'm in long-term recovery from the disease of addiction. My clean date is January 20th, 2014. That's going to be coming up on 4 years clean in January. So they just told me to tell you a little bit about myself, right? And it took me a very long time to. Everybody asked me why did you use heroin? Where did it bring? Like how? Why? And I really didn't understand that question until I got to the point where I got clean and I started working on myself and to really shed some light on my demons. And you know, when I was 11 years old, I had a best friend. He was my hero. He was my dad, right? And I was 11 years old. He had bad multiple sclerosis, and he was a stay-at-home dad. and he was with me 24/7. And I was a daddy's boy, and he wasn't feeling good one night, so we went to the high school play one night. And when we came home, I went in to check on daddy, but I found him overdosed. If I close my eyes now, I can literally see that picture in my head. And that's when my world flipped upside down. With his life insurance money, we bought a house. They bought new tables, they bought new couches, they bought new dogs. We had a niece. Everybody was worried about the wood matching the furniture, the wood matching the ceiling fans, all that type of stuff. But everybody forgot about Nikki. They didn't understand that I really needed that love at a young age. They didn't really realize that he found his father overdosed at the age of 11. And I was just so lost in my own world. So little by little, the disease of addiction creeps in on you. And I started drinking, I started feeling a little better. I started smoking weed, I started feeling a little better. And then I broke my wrist, and at the age of 17, I found out that I can use x-rays to get prescription drugs, right? And so I just started doing that for 6 years, for pills after pills after pills after pills. I have throughout my history, I have 18 arrests, 17 misdemeanors, and 7 felonies. All finding ways and means to get that one more drug in me. And like I said, it was a long road to get here. It was a very long road to get here. But through that, I multiple county jail stays, 4 rehabs, 3 detoxes. I tried to go to a different state. I always brought myself with me. And I just didn't know what to do. 7.5 months in county jail. I was waiting on drug court, and I sat in drug court. I sat in the TC program in county jail, which is called the Adult Substance Abuse Program. And at that time, it was ran by Ed Mann. And every time I got locked up, I always played spades. I always watched TV. I didn't care really. Worked on myself, but at this time I stayed in that program for 6 months. I was locked away. I thought my life was better locked away. I'm clean. Just leave me in here. Just leave me in here. But drug court, they approved me. I got released, and like he said, I had to see a probation officer once a week. I had to see him once a week. I had to go to ILP. I had to do this. I had to do that. I had to be in by 10 o'clock at night. I had to do this. I had to do that. I needed structure to my life. I really needed to learn how to walk again, because I only knew one way of living. And little by little, there's 4 different phases in drug court. The first phase is that crucial one, and then phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and it just gets easier and easier and easier because we get our lives back here. And so basically, now I have a job with a 401k. I have health insurance, I have life insurance. I actually care about my life today. I want to be here with you guys. My message is that God saved me for a reason. I believe that He had a purpose for me way before the drug entered my body. I'm on YouTube. I was on 101.5. I'm in middle schools, I'm in high schools, I'm in ERs trying to get them into treatment. And back then when I was using, I said, why me? And today I think, why me? I stole it from everybody in my family. I stole everybody from my life. I would still wonder, why me? And every friend that I visit at their casket, I promised them, but every single breath and beat in my heart, that I would do anything to get this message of recovery to anyone. Because it's possible. If this drug addict can do it, anybody can. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Nicholas. So you mentioned 4 years. You're a recent graduate. So now we can turn to Emil, who was, I guess, just recently in the program. I want you to share your experiences and what you're seeing today.
Not quite as loud as him.
It's actually better if you
Just
keep
lean
it,
in.
because it'll pick it up on.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, my name is Emil Savia. I've been in drug court since January of 2015. My sobriety date is December 17th, 2014. I mean, Nick really just masterfully covered, you know, the whole addiction to recovery. I didn't have an experience like him, that traumatic experience as a child. But what I did have is, from a very small age, before drugs and alcohol went into my body, I felt less than. I didn't feel good enough. I was scared. I had anxiety. And just like he said, a little pot in high school made me feel better. You know, I remember the first time I drank and I smoked some pot with my high school friends. Everyone was just as lucky to hang out with me as I was to hang out with them. And that was the first time I ever felt that way in my life. And I gotta tell you, I mean, I partied a lot and I did a lot of crazy stuff in high school, but I was always a straight A student. I was actually the DARE graduate award winner. Yeah, right. But no, just because I was a manipulator, I learned how to beat the system. And I actually went off to college here, and I went to Rowan University, and I graduated with honors, and I got a great job out of college. But everywhere, like he said, everywhere I went, it took me with me. And I would go on these stints where I would do really bad with drugs, and then I'd clean up my act because, you know, the boss was after me and I had to look good, so I'd clean up for a little bit. But once I graduated, got a good job, bought a nice house, a nice car, everything was going great. And I remember I was very insecure about my teeth. And I went for dental work, right? And I got all the big teeth here, and I got a prescription of Percocet. And that was the first time I ever did an opiate. Before that, it was all a little bit, you know, marijuana, a little cocaine, a lot of alcohol. But that was the first time I got Percocet. And from there, my life just went out of control. I went doctor shopping, as they call it. I went and I got, you know, oh, my back's killing me, and I'm going for MRIs and CAT scans and all this stuff so I can get prescription pills. And guess what? When it got too expensive, when I lost the car, when I lost the house, I turned to heroin. And my life just went out of control. Finally, my family cut me off. I was living in my car, and it was like a little beat-up car. And I just couldn't do anymore, and I just kept going to jail. I think I've spent about 2.5 years of my life behind bars. You know, in and out, little 2 months here, 3 months there. And the funny thing is, every time I go to like a treatment center or whatnot, my insurance would cut out, and my insurance would say, you're cured, 2 weeks, you're cured, get back out there, you're good. And it was terrible. Lost my best friend to this, lost all my family. I robbed them just like you did. I robbed everybody. Everyone gave up on me. And on December 17th, 2014, I got arrested in Sayreville for trying to intentionally overdose, and I guess I caused some noises, and the police came and they brought me to jail. And I sat there for a while, and an evaluator came to see me from drug court. And I didn't know much about it, but I was so beaten that I said, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. And I started listening. Drug court sent me to a 6-month inpatient program. They didn't ask me where's the money coming from. There was no insurance. They then sent me to a 3-month sober living house. They didn't ask me where the money's coming from. And then they sent me to outpatient 3 times a week after that. They didn't ask me where's the money coming from. And I listened to everyone in that place. And they told me to, when I was in the sober house, they told me to go get a job unloading trucks, making $8.75 an hour. And I was like, oh, no, I can't do that. But I listened to them. And I showed up, and you know what? I did my best every day that I was at that job. And I now actually run that company. That's the top boss. I have 165 It took me a while to really get beaten down, and then I just started listening. And I took the help laid out by drug court and my sponsor. And now that I'm on phase 4 myself, and I'm graduating soon, and I'm sure Nick's doing this now, I use a 12-step program to help keep me honest. And I sponsor guys. I have a 17-year-old sponsee, an 18, a 19-year-old sponsee, and one who's 27. All of them now have over 90 days to a year's sobriety. But I mean, at 17 years old, they're coming in for heroin, and it's scary. But that's what helps keep me sober, is trying to help somebody else and stay active. I also I volunteer at a sober recovery home in Freehold, New Jersey. And I try to bring commitments in, and I try to help another person. But all this was possible because drug court took their time to do it and gave me all the resources I needed. Anyway, thanks for letting me share that.
So we started off with the drug court and moved to graduate and a current student. So let's turn now to our police department and Lloyd. And Lloyd, you can talk about whatever you want, but obviously some of the things are probably on the mind. We know when you hear of an incident, how bad are the school systems? How bad is it in South Plainfield? Are we any worse, any better than anywhere else? I started tonight off talking about heroin town, and I think that's it's home, and essentially what what Judge Jones says, and in his remarks, this cuts across everything. So some of the folks that were in front of the judge and in the program and are doing very well, they ran into folks like you and their before they got to this point. What are you seeing, and what kind of message do you want to get across to the residents of South Plainfield?
Well, for the most part, in South Plainfield, and I don't know if it's because of ignorance, but I'm not really seeing much of a problem in the schools when it comes to opioids. Alcohol, marijuana, I think that's been the same for generations. You're always going to have kids experimenting with things. As far as these gentlemen over here, like the mayor said, I am the person, not me personally, but I'm one of the people that puts them in the position that they're in now. It's really not that fun. When you become a police officer, as you become a police officer, as you try to become a police officer, you have these dreams of jumping fences and chasing cars and racing people, and it turns into the reality of performing CPR and administering Narcan. And I had one opportunity where we actually did bring somebody back with the Narcan, only 2 months later for me to be the one processing the scene of him overdosing. So it's not pretty on any end. It's not enjoyable. It is it's a horrible thing that's going on in the country right now. I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. For the one incident where I actually did luckily bring somebody back, it was a family friend. It was somebody I've known for many years, the older sibling, and it was a proud moment. Someone where I could see him and actually bring him back. And I remember when he came back, I always heard stories of how sometimes people are going to be combative because they don't want to feel that way. They were feeling high, and now you just brought them back to normal. I never knew what to expect. And brought him back, and he just looked at me, and he said, "I'm so sorry, Lloyd," and he started crying. And I said, "What are you apologizing to me for?" I didn't quite get the shame that he felt. I didn't understand. I personally never did it, so I don't know what he was feeling. Just the same as he didn't know what I was feeling. He was probably assuming I was looking down on him. I'll never know, because we never discussed it. It was something that was never talked about again. But I know the pain I felt when I got sent back to the house. At the time, being a detective, having to process the scene. Mr. Cooper right here was in the investigation process of that, and that was a little frustrating as well. When it comes to the legality of not actually, the person that bothered me the most, there's no bringing him back, but there was a part of me that wanted to get vengeance in a legal form. I wasn't going to go hunt down the drug dealer, but my goal was to find the drug dealer and to have him sentenced to jail. Only to find, due to technicalities, after I did find him, and there was the toxicology screenings and stuff that maybe medical personnel can explain, that he got pretty much a slap on the wrist compared to what I was looking for him to be put away for life. I am in a situation right now where I do have family members that are addicts, that again started off as opiates, started off as prescribed pills, and are now heroin addicts. So it's, as a law enforcement officer, as the frontline person, we are working 24 hours a day. For the most part, we are there prior to the rescue squad, prior to the fire department, prior to everybody. We are the ones that have to witness the grieving families, or we are the ones that have to witness a person abandoned because their friends were too afraid to get caught. All the laws in the world, it's called safe haven law? Yeah, safe haven law grants immunity for some people if you are together and using heroin together and your friend overdoses. We're not going to arrest anybody, but there's still that fear, there's still a distrust, and it's completely understandable. But basically, I can't feel what the users have felt. I can't feel what the families go through who have lost a loved one yet. But I can tell you on the front line, on the law enforcement end, I'm not comparing it to anything that they have gone through, but it's not enjoyable either way. There's nothing enjoyable about the epidemic that we're going through. And it is painful financially, and it's painful emotionally on all levels.
Thank you. So Judge Jones talked about, I guess, the numbers earlier across the country. And you look at specifically the deaths of opioids in New Jersey, and you mentioned obviously 2017 was around that, but 1,901 people just in the state of New Jersey died from opioids. We're going to go to our prosecutor next. So again, you kind of walk through the reign of the system here. We started again with the judge and the police officer. I guess the next person, you two guys didn't want to see, or maybe it's better that you eventually did, is the prosecutor. So you work through the legal system, and you end up, probably at some point across the table from this fine gentleman. So go ahead and take it away, sir.
Well, just to follow up on some of the comments. Last night I had the unfortunate experience to attend a wake of a prominent Middlesex County lawyer who lost his child to the disease of addiction at 33 years of age. And him and I embraced, we talked, and I welcomed him to the club of having to bury a child. And it's something that he never wanted to experience, and I think there was this sense of calm and like something, the pink elephant in the room, no one really wanting to address it. And I think that follows along the judge's comments of the stereotypes, that it is not the stereotypes of 20 years ago of the alleys and the needles and the syringes and things of that nature. The drug is quite prevalent, it's quite cheap right now, and snorting is probably one of the most common forms of ingestion, and it can happen at any given time. As far as, I'm not going to echo the comments of the judge regarding the statistics. There's absolutely no doubt that the product that the community, society, law enforcement, the court system gets at the other end of a prison term is nowhere near as productive or efficient as the product that we get at the conclusion of a successful participant in drug court. But it's a struggle for law enforcement. It's a struggle to balance the protection of the community with the rehabilitation. The judge talks about certain offenses that are statutory bars to admission to drug court. And I can't tell you, I probably review a half a dozen files every day as to whether or not I'm going to amend the charge from a armed robbery with a finger, with a pen, with a BB gun, or something along those lines to allow treatment, or do we then look at the No Early Release Act with 85% served without parole, 10 to 20 on an offense like that. So that's the balance that my office undertakes each and every day, and we try to work with drug court, allowing participants to get the treatment that they desire and that they need. And it's a balance. It starts in the family court and it goes all the way up to adult court. And I can't tell you the number of young people, because family court is so focused on rehabilitation that we don't get the treatment and the message that they need. And they transition right into adult court and find themselves facing the Graves Act, mandatory sentences for guns. They find themselves facing the No Early Release Act. They find themselves facing brimage for our drug offenses. And then we have to make that tough decision as to whether or not we're going to take the risk and allow a young person to engage in drug court. And that's something that my office struggles with on a daily basis. I will, with provisos that was mentioned previously, I think we need to be ever vigilant with our young people and the big debate today, and our Governor-elect Murphy thinking that legalizing marijuana is the answer to everything. And I'm here to say that that's going to be a huge problem. It's going to be, if anyone who doesn't recognize that it's a gateway drug to worse things, they're really fooling themselves. And when we tell our young people, don't worry, they're just experimenting, that's nonsense. And then you've heard the stories right here. As far as vigilant, again, being our doctors and our pharmacies, it is absolutely amazing the number of investigations that I have going at any given time. A doctor that, you know, my big toe hurts, my back hurts, my, you know, and, oh, yeah, okay, well, here's a script, and, you know, here's 40 pills, and if you need more, why don't you come back and see me? And let's face it, the number of root canals that, you know, my son gets, and the next thing you know, he walks out with a prescription for 10 Vicodins, and I'm like, what the hell do you need that for? Oh, well, the doctor said. I said, yeah, great. I said, well, you know, if you need it, you come and see me, and we'll start out with some Tylenol at the cabinet. We don't need to fill that prescription. The other thing that I'd like to talk about just briefly is criminal justice reform. One of the things that that started in January of this year is doing away with monetary bail. And I can only tell you that some of the gentlemen mentioned the ASAP program at our jail. It's not doing well. It's, quite frankly, it's floundering, because without that ability to secure repeat offenders in the ASAP program and things of that nature, we're back right out on the street dealing with the same repeat offenders, back with shopliftings and strong arm robberies with shopliftings that have gone bad, and things of that nature. So there's some collateral damage with regard to criminal justice reform and the inability to secure treatment on a mandated basis at the ASAP program. And the last thing, and maybe the judge wants to follow on, one of the other things that the benefit, and it's only recently enacted, and I think it was earlier this year, is expungements. Graduates from the drug court are entitled to expungements for a big part of their record, if not the entire record. So successful completion and a little bit of toil and hard work, and then their record could in fact be expunged as well. So sobriety and a clean record as a result of drug court, and let's face it, whether Detective McNelly or First Assistant Prosecutor or society, that's a win-win for all of us. And I appreciate you here.
So this is tough. Again, I'm a father of 16-year-old twin boys in high school. It's something always on your mind. And I guess when, I don't know if it was Nick, or I think it was Nick who had mentioned the straight A student involved in all the things, same thing, you know, my boys are model students, you always wonder, right? And we all love our kids, tragedy happens, right? So our next speaker is Sandy. She is, you know, is a parent who had lost a son, who has lost a son due to an overdose. And I know this is, I can't even pretend to know how difficult this is. So Sandy, take whatever time you need. Share as much as your story as you want, and what do you want to get across to the residents here?
Well, my name is Sandy, and my husband Tom and I lost our son, an only child, Tommy, on October 17th of 2015 from a heroin overdose. And we talk about the fact that it's changed the type of people that you think are on drugs. Everybody always thinks of the people in an alley. And Tommy was certainly not in an alley. He had a wonderful home life. He, you know, was a great kid. He was a great student, and he was an alcoholic. His drug of choice was alcohol. And it went, further and further and further. And he also had gotten hurt and was given pain pills, and then more pain pills and more pain pills. And I think the thing that I want to say and get across to parents is, a lot of times in the past couple of years since Tommy's passing, I've really had the honor of speaking with a lot of people, not in groups, but parents who have called me that are suffering or have lost a child or know somebody that's suffering. And what I try to tell them, and when I'm talking to them, there's so many people that believe that because their child's an athlete, because they're busy, because they're popular, because they're anything, that it's not going to happen to them. Well, I'm here to tell you that. You can be the most popular, the most well-loved, the most entitled person in the world. It doesn't matter. When that drug gets you, and as my son said to me 2 days before he died, and I had a long talk with him, and he had been clean and sober for quite a while. He was doing pretty well. And we were having a really nice conversation, and I asked him, I said, do you want to die? And he said, Mom, no, I love you and Daddy more than anything in the world. He said, but when in that throes of that addiction, there's no greater love than that heroin or whatever it was. And the funny thing, not funny, haha, the funny thing is that the first time he took heroin, he actually woke us up in the middle of the night, my husband and I. And he knew as soon as he took it that it was going to be his downfall. And he woke us up and told us that. I'm in trouble. He didn't say those words. He said some bad words that I can't say. But he was such a great guy. And it's just, the heartache and the loss is something that is unimaginable. And I don't want anybody ever to have to go through it. But my husband and I were at the cemetery the other day, and within the space of a room this big, there's 3 other South Plainfield people, young South Plainfield people that we visit every time we go. So there's 4 of them that died within, 2 died within 6 months of Tommy, and another one just passed this year. And to sit there and we walk around and we look at them and the lives lost, really, it's just unbelievable. And I'm so proud of you 2 gentlemen. God bless you for what you've done. It's just amazing. But I think, you said something that was very important when you're talking about going into rehab and coming out, and then it's, they're in 28 days. They got to go. And I always used to be like a crazy mother. And I would say to them, if my son had cancer, you wouldn't throw him out of the hospital in 28 days and say his cancer's gone. But because he's an addict, you go through hell as a parent, and not the hell that they go through. And so many people have said to me, are you embarrassed? No, I'm not embarrassed. I am proud. I am so proud of my son because he fought a battle that most of us in this room couldn't do. And he worked harder than most people at their jobs just to stay sober, just to live his life. So am I embarrassed? No. I'm brokenhearted, but I'm here to tell you that, for as long as I go on, I'm going to do whatever I can for others that are suffering with this terrible disease. And like I said, you guys, I'm so proud of you. And I kind of guess I wish that Tommy would have gotten arrested a few times. Maybe he would have gotten in trouble. He never went to jail, so we didn't have that. But we had enough. But the town of South Plainfield has been amazing to us through this whole terrible 2 years. The support and the love that we've gotten from this community has been overwhelming, overwhelming. And I just don't want to see other children. I teach first grade here in South Plainfield, and I look in the eyes of these little kids, and I just pray that it never grabs them, because once it does, it's really, really hard to get over. So I thank you for letting me speak, and good luck to all of you. Thank you.
So we're going to progress on to, we have 2 representatives here from JFK Center for Behavioral Health, Vicki and Dina. So why don't you guys talk about, you've heard from a number of the professionals here, you've heard from, you know, people that are in the drug court program, recovering addicts, you've heard from parents that have been impacted. What are you guys seeing? What's the advice that you have for people that are in any spectrum of this? How do we move the ball forward, so to say, and you know, get to a better spot?
This button?
Yeah, there you go. Pull it, pull it close.
Hello, hello?
Hello.
Okay. Hi. My name is Vicki, and I'm from JFK Center for Behavioral Health. I'm the addiction supervisor there. It's an outpatient program, and we have people with addiction problems, maybe mental health problems, and we also have co-occurring, which is a combination of both, which is what we see a lot. A few things I'd like to say, you know, everybody's speaking, and I'm like, okay, well, when that person said this was good, that was good. So some of the things I think that are important to reiterate, and then I'll say a little bit about what we see every day. First thing I would say is that, especially when we work with people, and somebody had said before, you know, people come into treatment and they feel this big when they walk in the door. So it's very important for us that, you know, in the field that we work in, there are no judgments. We don't look at anybody for what they've done, their history. It's about help, it's about future, it's about, like I'll say to people so many times, it's not how you come in, it's how you leave the program, which really seems to make the difference. The other thing that I would say was in speaking, and you talked about with drug court, how amazing that's been, because I remember when it first started back in 2002, no way could anyone be on any MAT, and now look at how far that's come. Years ago, right, drug court was like, you could take an aspirin, right? And look at it now, how it's really gone with the times, and probably part of that success rate as well, I would think. The other thing, I think, which is important, and one of the things when you guys were speaking about, you know, going into the system and going into jail and coming out, and I think what also goes with drug court or anything else is rehab is great, but like you said, 28 days, sometimes people aren't even out of a fog in 28 days. We've gotten to the point where it's so short because of insurances. It's not so much that we figured out how to do all this stuff so great so quickly. It's just the nature, you know, and it is true, a lot of times it's easier to work with people who don't have insurance, because like you said, there is no question about, do you have the money, do you have, you know, where sometimes people come in and it's like, yeah, they're there 3 days, 5 days, to try to get somebody in intensive outpatient that's 3 times a week, 3 hours a week. I had somebody on the phone the other day, on the phone, they want a report on this person after every 3 sessions, which is once a week, to determine whether or not they need to stay in treatment. Now, they have a drug history this long, an opiate history this long, and they're going to go back and forth with us trying to, well, why would this person need this much treatment? Aren't they clean? You know, and they're not getting it. What we see, which is what the gentleman alluded to, you may get the clientele that you get, especially with the opiates. What you will see is, like someone said, you might get someone with an injury who never had a drug problem, a history before, nothing. Or you might have somebody who grew up and they started partying, and of course, especially with the opiates, nobody tells you how addictive, especially when you're a young kid, nobody tells you how addictive it is. Oh, well, the first time I tried it, one of my friends said, here, try this. They didn't tell me that X amount of days later, I would think I had the flu, but I was really going through withdrawals from my drug addiction. So we see a lot of people who are uninformed when they even come in the door sometimes. What we also see, and I've been in the field at this point 19 years, so we've seen the old heroin from the beginning, and then it kind of died out, and now, you know, of course, the explosion with the prescription. But the one thing that we need to understand as far as today is concerned is that even in groups we run, I haven't, and you know, maybe you can even I can't remember the last time I probably didn't have at least one group, one week where somebody said, somebody I know this weekend passed away. And we're talking local. Like you said, we're talking in, I work in Edison. So we're talking, say, anywhere from Upper Monmouth County to, you're talking to Union County, you know? So we're seeing, I mean, this is like every week. There's like, well, I know this guy, oh, yeah, this one was a friend of mine. Oh, I just got a text. Oh, this one passed away. I mean, it's really horrible. And like I said, a lot of them are babies. And the thing is, the younger somebody starts to use, especially the opiates, the more difficult it becomes because they don't have the coping skills that adults have. They don't have the interests. You know, it's one thing, like if I say to somebody, like say, somebody talked before about somebody, a 17-year-old kid, you have a 17-year-old kid. Okay, if you started using at 13, okay, well, let's go back and decide what were we doing before? What were we, you know, what were we doing? Oh, well, I was playing jacks or whatever. Like, they have nothing to go back to say, what am I even interested in? Some of these kids don't even have an interest. They don't know what they want to do. They don't know what it's like to have fun without getting high, if they will. So a lot of that is developing coping skills and developing how to avoid relapse. And as you said about your son, like, it is true, like when that gets a hold of somebody, no matter what. And what happens is, and I'm not, you know, but I know what happens sometimes too is when you have somebody who is doing well and they are clean, what happens is if they relapse, many times they do overdose because their body, because you build a tolerance, so their bodies aren't used to it. So what will happen is you'll hear about these people from the room say, oh my God, this guy, he was clean for like a couple of years and he was doing so great. You'll hear people in the room say, and he OD'd and he died. And it's one of those things. It's a very sad thing. We're seeing, what we are seeing though, much like Judge Jones has spoken about, I was at some, the Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services. We have like the meetings 4 times a year. They talk to the providers. One of the things they're looking to do at this point is the medication-assisted therapy is huge on their list, and that would be things like methadone, Suboxone, Vivitrol, which is naloxone, in the injectable form, which helps people because if you take it injectable, you take it once a month. So it usually works to, it blocks somebody from being able to get high. So I have somebody, and he gave a great analogy. He said, you know what? You know, he was talking about alcohol, but he's also a recovering opiate user. He's like, with the Vivitrol, he goes, without the Vivitrol, I go to a party, I'm not using. He goes, but I keep looking, and I keep looking, and I keep looking, and I turn around, and I keep looking, and then I go in. He goes, I'm on the Vivitrol shop, I look quick, say, and keep going. So that's where that seems to, at this point, help with some of the thought processes that people have. So we're seeing that. We're also, what's very important is the prescription monitoring program that the doctors have now, where you're able to go, where the doctors, not any of us, are able to go in and see about doctor shopping. So people can't doctor shop anymore. Let's put it this way, it's a lot harder than it used to be to doctor shop. So we're seeing that, we're seeing, like I said, people younger and younger, which is no surprise. And like I said, opiates is still huge. That's probably the biggest. That and alcohol, because those, of course, also are physically addictive. Not only are they psychologically. But what we're starting to see, and that could be maybe another talk, but we're seeing cocaine come back again on the rise. We're seeing that. I mean, it never really goes away, but it's starting to, you know, and by the time I think it's starting, it must have been here in like 2 years, you know. So even for those of us in the field, we think we know something new, and we're so behind the times. So, but it's very important, like I said, I think it's very important, the education, and you know, like they say, everything starts, you know, at home, and making the time, like you said, for your kids when you can, and realizing that kids do go through stuff, and you know, sometimes, you know, they are, many of my clients will say, it's you know, masking. It was masking something else that was going on. So A lot of times that's the case. So but you work with people, you also work, it's individually based. You cannot put people in a cookie cutter model. It just doesn't work. People bring different things to the table. Also, it's very important, over the years, they've developed strength-based. You look at people's strengths. You don't look at, oh my God, this is your 14th time back in treatment. Well, damn, at least you made it back 14 times, you know, and that's the reality. I mean, how you walk through this door, that means there's an opportunity. And that's how you have to look at it, because you can't work in this field for 20 years and worry about a success rate, because you know what? Nobody would ever do these jobs, because the success rate is not at any given time. It can be, you know, but like you said, usually somebody has to go through it a couple of times before they're ready. And the one other thing I just wanted to say, and then I'll turn it over to Dina, who actually wanted to talk a little bit about the marijuana situation, so we could segue off of that. But just to say that one of the things, you know, we look at statistics and people and where they're, you know, where people are, and it's, you know, it's, people are realizing it's not an inner city problem, but I was in Rutgers. I have a couple of degrees, and one of them's from Rutgers, and I was there a few years ago, and one of the gentlemen was doing, one of the professors was doing research testing. And what they're doing is they're looking at all these opiate overdoses. This was a couple of years ago, and what they're saying is, wow, all these people, look at, oh, it must still be an inner city problem. No, it's not an inner city problem. What's happening is people are going to the inner cities, if they're doing heroin, to get their heroin. They're using what, as soon as they get it. I mean, you've got people getting in the car, like shooting up before they leave. So people are ODing in these major cities. So people are saying, well, that's a problem. No, it's not what it is. It's the kids from the burbs who are dying in the inner cities. And so that's the whole thing with statistics too. We take a look at them and say, oh, well, you know what, all these people died in Newark, it must be a Newark issue. No, it's the people from the counties going there, and those are the kids who are dying. So that's another piece of it. So, sorry, didn't mean to rant, but that makes sense.
So I just wanted to add a little bit as to what I see as well, because part of my job description at JFK, we are a part of affiliated with the hospital. So oftentimes I'm called directly into the hospital. Sorry. I'm called directly into the hospital to do what's called a consult. It's a consultation with patients who have overdosed or have any type of situation relating to any drug or alcohol. So in addition to unfortunately seeing people who have recently overdosed or being administered Narcan, and you know, it's all too familiar names over and over again, I'm also seeing people who are struggling with medical ailments due to their prolonged use. You know, people who have pancreatitis from drinking, or infections and stuff, and you know, heart issues from opiate use or cocaine and everything else. So, I mean, and week after week, it's, you know, 2 consults this week, 3 consults the next week, 5, 10. It's just a growing number. So that's another thing that I see often is I actually get to go into the hospital, into the ER, into, you know, all the departments and speak with people at their most vulnerable point and try and help them get into treatment. So that's another part of what we do. But I did want to build on what the gentleman at the end and the prosecutor had said as far as marijuana, because it is the inevitable future that it will be legalized, and it is more likely to cause a lot of problems. People don't realize at this point in time, New Jersey state law, you can get a DUI for marijuana. And with legalizing it, I think that's only going to increase. And I'm getting more and more phone calls from high schools for kids who are smoking weed or selling weed at school or showing up high, and they're trying to get them into treatment now because they're starting to realize you can't disregard it, because that's how it starts. Both these gentlemen, both their stories started with, I started smoking weed and started feeling good. And it is, we can't disregard it. And it's controversial as far as being legalized and as far as being a gateway drug. You know, I don't know statistically speaking, but in my experience, I'd say 95% of the people who ultimately wound up putting a needle in their arm started smoking weed. You know, that's not to say that everyone will. You know, there's biological and social and environmental factors to be added into that, but it's a huge possibility and we can't ignore it. You know, and it's unfortunate that now it's harder to find than heroin is. So, you know, but when you're looking for something and you're getting into that criminal element of, you know, searching for drugs or hanging out with people who have drugs, the person who has weed also has heroin. So, you know, it's a huge issue and it's something that, you know, we should be, you know, opening our eyes to as well. But, you know, at our facility, we offer outpatient-based treatment, intensive outpatient. We do adolescent programs. We have smoking cessation groups and harm reduction and abstinence-based programs, and you know we focus on co-occurring. So I mean, thank you for listening to us and what we see. We also have a bunch of brochures. Please make sure you take one if you know someone who needs it on your way out.
Can I just say one thing about marijuana? The other thing, and maybe this sounds more controversial too, but I also know, and like when I talk about marijuana, and I'll say to a lot of people that I'm talking to, like, it's not your mother's marijuana. It's so different today than it was years ago.
I was just about to bring that up. A lot of, I don't know whether it's more addictive or not, I guess it is.
Well, it's more THC, the higher level of THC in it.
So, and I'm sure the prosecutor and the judge are aware of this, but I guess people go in, they buy marijuana, they think it's probably the safest of the drug. And I guess what you're hearing is more and more stories of marijuana laced with things that...
Oh, and the fentanyl, we didn't even talk about that. You all talk about the fentanyl. But the other piece of that is also too, a lot of parents are like, oh yeah, well it's only weed. You know, I remember I smoked when I was a kid, but you know, remember too, some kids, if they're rebellious, you let them smoke weed at home. Oh, well that's okay, I can smoke weed. What can I do to really, excuse the expression, piss my parents off? I mean, I'm not saying that's everybody, but you have to think about that too, because you know, the permissiveness is okay, but then what does that mean? You make a higher line for that daring or whatever. So I think that's another piece of that marijuana thing is, you know, if that's okay, well then what am I going to do to rebel a little bit?
And I think unfortunately that's one of the things that you seem to see more prevalent is that it's becoming more and more acceptable or okay. And that's, I guess, something to worry about.
Just to follow up briefly, as far as the fentanyl and which is synthetic heroin and spice that we see. As was mentioned, this is not Cheech and Chong. This is not. This is for real. I've seen young people overdose on marijuana, go into convulsions, and be in the hospital for a substantial period of time. And other young people with fentanyl. It's not where the addiction caught up. It could be one time with a reaction to fentanyl. And talk about controversial when we talk about educating our children. I can tell you the number of times that I have videos outside of St. Peter's and Robert Wood Johnson of cars pulling up, tossing young people in an emergency room. We need to educate our young people that whether it's Bon Jovi's Law, whether it's Safe Haven or whatever, as soon as there's a reaction, as soon as something's gone sideways, get on the phone, call the police. Everyone present in order to get that person who's experiencing a narcotic episode is immune. I dismiss indictments on a regular basis because it's been established to me that somebody picked up the phone, called 911, and everyone there is immune from prosecution. And I know it's somewhat controversial, but when you see young people being tossed out like garbage outside Robert Wood Johnson on video because they OD'd at a frat, and the frat spent 20 minutes calling the drug addict cab company to see if they can bring them to the hospital, and then finally somebody realizes, and it's a half an hour, and they're just bringing a young person to the hospital and tossing them out, and it's horrendous. And as far as the treatment, and as some of the gentlemen mentioned, sober living, the moment a young person goes into treatment is the day they plan for discharge, and that's one of the things that I see constantly. Yeah, I went away 28 days, 6 months, and then, yeah, what happened? Oh, well, so-and-so was supposed to arrange the outpatient to follow up the discharge. And I'm like, well, how long has that been? It's been about 6 weeks, and how you doing? the moment they walk in the door, somebody should be planning for their ultimate discharge, whether it's 28, 6 months, or whatever. The only other thing, and to go on the line of controversial, is our schools to prison pipeline. What does that mean? It means using exclusionary discipline in order to put young people out of school, and they just go down that bad path, and it gets further and further. At my office, we attempt to work with schools in order to get young people treatment, while at the same time keeping them in the seat, getting educated, because possessing marijuana, I know it's in schools is horrendous. It's going to all these different things. But putting that young person out for 10 days and then expecting to bring them back and say, hey, catch up where you left off. How does that get accomplished? And I was joking one time with a chief from Woodbridge who I went to high school with, and the nuns didn't have much of an effect on either one of us. And he indicated to me that anytime he has a rash of daytime burglaries, the first thing he does is go to the schools to check as to who was suspended. And we need our student assistant counselors to work with young people to keep them in the front seat of that classroom and not sending them home for 2, 3, 5, sometimes it's 10 days, and these young people come back to school and they are absolutely lost. And just the last point, as far as the drug court and co-occurring, so many of our young people are dealing with traumas today, and masking, and that's what this addiction is all about, and to deal with the co-occurring issues, the mental health issues, along with the disease of addiction, and to try to figure out that the chicken or the egg is really a non-issue. We need to address both sides of the addiction issue, the mental health as well as drugs and alcohol.
If I could just jump in for one thing. Prosecutor Kubright mentioned fentanyl. How many people in the audience know what fentanyl is? A lot of people don't. Fentanyl is 50 times more powerful than heroin, and it's coming in. You probably have better figures than I have about the way it's coming into New Jersey, but they should. I was at a judicial training a couple weeks ago, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but they have a vial with heroin in it. It kind of covers the bottom a little bit, and then they have one with fentanyl in it, and there's maybe like 18 grains, like grains of sand or salt in there. They think that the next thing that's coming is what's called carfentanil.
It's already here. It's already
1 grain is equal to that much heroin. So that's the next wave of what's coming. I'm seeing more and more fentanyl in my when we test in our courtroom. It's scary.
And the other thing about the fentanyl too, which I forgot to mention, is when 2 milligrams can be an overdose, and the thing is that can also be absorbed through the skin. So if somebody picks up, let's just say, so anybody who's in the room with somebody, right? I mean, if you, let's even say a police officer wasn't, if they went to pick that up, it can be absorbed through the skin, and it can cause a lot of issues.
So I promise we're going to get to your questions, but before we do, we're going to go to Stephen D. So we promise we'll only call him Stephen D. There's too many letters in his last name. Stephen's from the Carrier Clinic. Most people are familiar about the Carrier Clinic just as they are with JFK. And as we mentioned, JFK mentioned as well, there are information that's out on the tables there. So feel free before you leave, grab some of that stuff. Again, even if you don't think you need it, you may know somebody that does, and eventually you may. So again, Stephen, right up to you. We'll open up to questions if anybody has any questions for any of these guys, and then we can leave it up to some final words. So Stephen, take it away.
Great, thank you. My name is Steve Jevashevsky. That's actually how you say it, but it's spelled D-R-Z-E-W-O-S-Z-E-W-S-K-I, so it's a long, drawn out, I used to have a sadistic gym teacher in high school. He used to call me Alphabet. He said I had every letter in my last name. So I don't know where to even begin, because so much has been covered, and so much is, there's so much going on in the addiction world right now. We are in the midst of a major crisis, a major epidemic. There are a lot of things coming forward. We have the outreach programs now that, if someone is brought back in the emergency room, there are navigators and people that meet with them now to try to get them directly into treatment, which is great, because we got tired of seeing people getting revived and then going right back out to the street, you know, you're better now, you're not in crisis anymore, and you send them back out to the street just to use again, and the likelihood of overdose after that is much higher after you've been, revived. So also after treatment, the likelihood of overdose is higher if you go back out and relapse. So that's something we try to educate a lot on before patients are leaving Carrier Clinic. I run the Blake Recovery Center, which is our addictions program. It's a 40-bed detoxification rehabilitation unit. I've been there a long time. We've seen all kinds of changes, and everybody's absolutely correct. This is not, you know, I like to say that we're not dealing with the old drugs. These are new drugs. They're a lot more powerful. Fentanyl was brought up. I mean, if you come in and tell me that you're using heroin, you're actually using fentanyl. I mean, 9 times out of 10, they're cut with fentanyl. Why do dealers do that? I'll tell you why. Because it's got a shorter half-life and a bigger punch. So it hits you harder and it brings you back. The money's in the comeback for drug dealers, right? How many times can I get this person to come back? So if I give them something that's going to knock them on their butt, so to speak, and then make, you know, and be out of their system quicker so they get sicker faster, they're going to come back to me sooner. All right, so then carfentanil comes into the picture, and now we're seeing that. That's actually, we're starting to see that where it's actually first responders are overdosing who have touched it. Drug dogs have died because they found it and sniffed it, and you know, it's that powerful. So drugs are actually getting stronger. There's another thing called gray death that's out there. It's another form of an opioid. So they're constantly making new stuff. It's more powerful, with a bigger punch, and they want to bring people back to the dealers quicker. Well, yeah, there's you know, as addicts use their brain gets rewired. All right, it just gets wired. It doesn't mean that they love their family less because they're stealing from them. It doesn't mean, you know, that they are bad people. They're not bad people trying to get good. They're sick people trying to get well. We have to understand that addiction is a disease. Addiction is a disease. It's a biopsychosocial, and I would add spiritual disease because it affects you on all those levels. Okay, so you know, just treating someone in one way doesn't work. You got to treat all of it. You got to treat the person holistically, and that's one of the things we really try to do at the Carrier Clinic. We try to give people as much time as we possibly can. Believe me, we're fighting with insurance companies daily to try to get people as much time as we possibly can. Recently, there was a law that was passed called Chapter 28, which is allows for you know, some insurance reform where patients are now getting a little more time than they used to get, which is great. I mean, that's, and still 28 days. It's not a long period of time, right? 28 days is a month. That goes by like that. And you know, even though we have a pretty packed schedule, it's impossible to think that treatment is going to be, you're going to be able to say, okay, I'm cured in 28 days. Nobody's cured in 28 days. Nobody's cured ever. An addict, it's a chronic disease. So you'll be an addict forever. Doesn't mean you have to continue to use forever, though. All right? Recovery is possible. So, you know, we can't judge the addict. We have to constantly, you know, we have people come back 2, 3, 4 times. I had one gentleman came back 8 times in 1 year. 8 times walked through my door. Now, you know, do we say, no, you've been here 8 times, that's enough. You should have gotten it by now. Why didn't you figure this out? Or, you know, instead of that, we welcome people back and say, look, we got to figure out what we're doing, what we're going to do different this time, what's going to change. You know, we're very involved in recovery-based treatment. So it's you know, and what that means, the recovery model is meeting the client where they are. Where are you at? I'm not going to tell you, you know, I'm not going to beat you over the head telling you need to get better because this is going on, that's going on, this is going on in your life. I'm not going to do that because people have been doing that already. Right? An addict is constantly told how much they're doing wrong. You know, I'm glad to see you. Welcome back. I'm glad you came in. Are we treating you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? That's the first thing we try to do, to make them feel comfortable enough to start sharing what's actually going on. Trauma, someone brought up trauma. I think that's a big deal. You know, addicts, if they don't start off using due to some traumas in their life, they develop them as they use. You know, that's you know, an addict, just using alone and going through what they're going through is traumatic. So, like I said, it's important to treat the whole dimensional person. You can't just treat one aspect of it. It's a holistic type recovery model. One thing I know is I could keep someone sober while they're in my program. Right? While they're in carrier clinic, I'm pretty sure I can keep them sober. If I can't, that's a problem. Right? So I'm pretty sure I could keep them safe and secure and sober while they're in there. So we really concentrate a lot on aftercare planning as well. You know, recovery doesn't have to be just inpatient for a year, right? Some people need that, not everybody does. So it could be transition from inpatient to outpatient to the next step to the next. I mean, that's what the continuum should look like. I tell people all the time, I try to work myself out of a job, right? What does that mean? I work myself out of a job means when you come in, you're meeting what we call a 3.7 ASAM level of care. It means you're in need of medical supervision, 24-hour nursing, a doctor, you're in need of all this stuff. You're in need of me, you're in need of all the things we could provide at this level. As we go, it should be harder and harder and harder for me to justify your treatment at this level of care, right? It should get harder, and it does. And then that's when we kind of get to that point where, you know, it's time to transition to the next step. Now, the next step would be a whole lot of things. The next step could be outpatient treatment, could be partial hospitalization with boarding. It could be, you know, a whole lot of different things, and one size does not fit all, you know. Not everybody gets sober the same way. That's one thing. The old school models used to be everybody has to fit into a mold. I don't know if any of you guys remember that?
Yes, absolutely.
Where you know, it used to be where if you came in the treatment, everybody had to, if you're not going to go to 12-step meetings, you're going to fail. Absolutely not. And they would tell people that. Doesn't necessarily mean that, right? There's all kinds of people who've gotten sober through their church, people who've gotten sober through, you know, rational recovery, smart recovery, as long as there's support. And that's the thing, they have to have allies. That's the one thing we see in common in recovering people. They have allies in the recovery process. They have people who support them in a positive way. Now, by supporting them, I don't mean be codependent to them and enabling them. I mean, support is sometimes making the tough decisions to where I'm not going to pay your phone bill this month. And I'm not going to keep paying for a car that you're running to Newark in, you know, and things like that. Sometimes it's making that support, you know, taking that stuff and taking that stuff back. As someone else brought up, discharge planning should be done from the start. So 3 things that we do, and this is what I have my counselors do anytime someone comes in. We assess, evaluate, develop a treatment plan, and discharge plan in the first session. Start that process, right? You start it. Doesn't mean it's going to end up being the treatment, the discharge plan that ultimately happens, but you start it because you want to get a head start, because it may take time to get somebody to the next step that they need to go to. So you want to have a good idea of what their thoughts are right from the get-go. Now, granted, they will change their mind 16 times in the process, but you know, that's up to us to help them figure out what it is best for them. A good program is client-centered. It's client-centric. It's based on their, you know, they have to feel like they have choice. You know, when someone walks into our program, or any hospital, they're giving up power. And that's one of the scariest things in the world for somebody. I'm giving up control of my life. I'm giving up, and I'm giving it up to you. And we have to do the best we can to give them the ability to have control over their life again in some way. So they're passing that along. It's scary. So we have to be able to foster, you know, their own drive for treatment. That's what we do. We concentrate on their motivations. What motivates somebody? You know, we know what motivates people to come in, right? Someone comes in, they may be motivated by the legal system. They may be motivated by their family. They may be motivated, you know, by their job. You know, I've had many clients come in and say, Steve, I'm here just because I wanted to get sober. And then I talked to them a little more and I said, what's going on in your life? And there's a lot of stuff happening, which is what we call external motivation pushes them in. Now, it doesn't mean we want to, you know, it doesn't matter to me what brought you in. It's what you leave with. It's what you go home with. It's that, can we get that push to a pull? Because I want them to be pulled towards something, right? I want them to say, okay, well, what do you desire? What do you want? What do you want to get from this process? And I want them to start focusing on that rather than what they're running away from, right? What they're trying to come in for. These are real important things. Just a couple things I want to bring up real quick. We also offer something called Nexalin therapy, which is a therapy that it's a transcranial neurostimulation, which stimulates the hypothalamus. Which, you know, from our reports right now, we're actually about to embark on a study with the University of Arizona. The IRB is currently in process, but it's something we're very excited about, which is going to hopefully assist people in the recovery process. One of the big things we hear is that it assists people with sleep. We're currently doing a study with UPenn on our adult psychiatric unit for depression with the same device. So we're very excited to see what happens with that. It's very promising. We also are working with the smartphone app called Trigger. Now, I mentioned I know I can keep people sober while they're in treatment, right? Well, think about this. What happens when they leave? Well, we have an app that we're using. It's called Trigger Health. It's another organization that came in and is providing it to us. But what it does is it allows us to stay in contact with clients after they leave. It allows them to message us directly into our dashboard. It also, you know, think about your phone. Your phone is an excellent predictor. These gentlemen from Stanford figured out one thing that's kind of really interesting, is your phone is an excellent predictor in behavior. Has anybody ever gotten into their car and it tells you how long it's going to take you to get to your next destination? Your phone is already tracking what you do. It's already picked up your patterns. So these guys figured out, let's capitalize on this and use this to help people stay sober. So people behave a certain way, and then when that pattern changes abruptly, we get an alert on our end that we'll get a score on our end that goes from 1 to 10. All right. Now the score, if the score all of a sudden it's a 2, it's a 2, it's a 2, this person's doing what they're supposed to do in their life, and all of a sudden it's a 10 or an 8. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to reach out on the dashboard. Is everything okay? How are you doing? You know, we're not going to say your score went up because that's intrusive, but we're going to say, we wouldn't do that, but we're going to say, hey, is everything okay? Is there anything we can help you with? And you'd be surprised how many people write back, no, I'm really struggling right now. Or they get in touch with us first before that even happens. I had a gentleman, and I'll share this story real quick and then I'll be quiet. I had a gentleman who messaged us on the dashboard and said, I don't know if you guys can help me with this. I got out 2 days ago. I'm a carpenter by trade, and I got a job, and I haven't worked in like 2 years. I have a job, but I don't have any work boots. Is there anything you can do? Now, to me, the first thing I think, when they came to me and said, I don't know what to do with this, first thing I thought was, well, that's a great reason to relapse, huh? You know, I'm doing everything right, and I don't have boots to even go to my job that I just got. And they wouldn't let him work without boots. So we were able to figure that out for him and get him a pair of boots, which, in my opinion, may have made all the difference in the world. It's the little things. It's the little things sometimes. And like I said, it's what happens after treatment. It's not always or after they leave us, not always what's going on, what's happening while they're there. So we provide the doorway, the tools, and the initial step. You know, and that's what I tell people, we're the doorway. The road is much longer. And this is the beginning. And, you know, we'll walk with you through the beginning, and we're going to try to stay with you as long as we can. You know, and that's pretty much all I got.
So we've been at this for an hour and a half. You guys have been patient, listening to hopefully a lot of good things. It's your turn. Any questions out here for audience? Feel free, if you're loud enough, if you want, reach out if you want to make sure that everybody can pick you up. Feel free to come over here.
Okay, I have one. Can somebody touch on vaping marijuana? Vaping.
Vaping marijuana. Anything specific, Department?
As far as vaping marijuana, it's a higher THC content. It's oftentimes called dabbing or dabbing. Yeah, it's like a more concentrated form of THC that is just a better high. It's you're getting more for your money and your oil. It's what's the other one with that? No, there's another word for it, but essentially it's just a more concentrated, more potent,
And you
more.
And you can't.
It's
smell it.
odorless.
Right,
And
you can't smell
odorless,
it.
yes.
That's such a huge thing. Like if somebody's in a car, like I said, how many times, you know, you get pulled, if somebody gets pulled over, the smell, right, this is totally different.
Yes, go ahead. In the back. If you're loud enough, you can talk.
I have a question. I'm actually interested in knowing what's being done to limit doctors from prescribing as the first round these very addictive drugs. So for instance, if you go to the dentist, instead of saying Tylenol, they're writing you a script right off the bat. Yes, you cannot doctor shop as easily as you did, but they're still writing these scripts. And even for younger and younger, for teenagers. So what's in it for the medical professionals that they just keep doing this knowing the epidemic that's happening now?
As far as us, since we're affiliated with the hospital, it has just been passed in our ER that we are not allowed to write out narcotic prescriptions unless it's like an extreme case of pain or, like a serious illness, like hospice related, as well as they're only given for less than a week. And there's no refills, and there's no calling in for a refill. You have to come back to see the doctor again. They're trying to replace that with some medically assisted treatments in the hospital for people who are drug seeking, as well as like having someone as myself come in and do a consultation with someone who is drug seeking. So instead of giving them the drugs that they're looking for, we're now just trying to do the alternative and help them get them into treatment.
But is there financial incentives for private physicians and the drug companies to do this? There are. Yes? No? Does anybody know?
But I know lots been cut back on what pharmaceutical companies can do when their sales reps go to the hospitals and doctors. And I thought, and I don't know if Mr. Kubright or even Judge Jones, I thought there was some legislation, I thought it was state legislation that's looking at limiting the number of pills or something like that. I don't know if that's gone anywhere.
There was some legislation introduced and considered earlier in the year. Well, one of the things is many employers are assisting in the battle by developing software and databases by which they can track prescription acquisition by each of their employees, thinking that they're able to then provide assistance and to stop before it rises to the level of addiction or the pharmaceutical shopping. So many times I'll be presented with cases that HR departments have brought me establishing through their computer systems, you know, the acquisition of far more pharmaceuticals than anyone could ever ingest in any given period of time. So corporate America has assisted us in the battle. I know that that's occurred in government as well, where certain agencies don't want to be paying exorbitant amounts for the pharmaceuticals, and they will engage us in trying to put an end to it.
And just to add to that, the law that you were talking about, Mayor, did pass. It's the New Jersey opioid law of 2017. Some of it has been discussed already at this table. It talks about the first prescription, and then it talks about what you can get in the second prescription. One of the things that I find interesting about it is we talked about up to the 5 days, but they also indicate it has to be the lowest effective dose for the patient, both the first prescription and the second prescription, as well as there's some things that the medical professionals. I'm just going by what I'm reading because I just happened to be at a seminar on this about a week ago. It does indicate that there are certain things that the doctor has to look at. Is the pain consistent with the pain that the patient originally had, things like that. So there is a new law out there.
Just from like an addict stand view, I can just tell you a story about my pharmacy view when I was using. I'm sure the prosecutor had many cases of, we call them dirty doctors and dirty pharmacists. And my pharmacist, for expired drugs, he gets a liquid in the mail, and he has to melt his drugs in like a pickle jar kind of, and he has to send them back to the manufacturer through mail, right? So my pharmacy, he was supposed to melt thousands and thousands of roxicet, which was 30 milligrams of oxycodone, but he sent them back just a liquid in Tylenol. And my pharmacy kept the 1,000 pills for himself, and he started pocketing all my money for himself. So, is there a financial? Yes.
Okay.
In some cases, no. But it's just, but they're doing everything they can to. I've heard pharmacy after pharmacy after pharmacy, like Lincoln Pharmacy in Edison, Route 27, they closed down. This guy closed down, that guy closed down, and the doctors that I went to go see, they didn't even look at my face. They asked me what I wanted. They just wanted my money. So there's, you know, it's a money. Sometimes it's a money deal, sometimes it's not a money deal. But from an addict point of view, that's what I look for. You know, I shop and I shop. That's why we call it doctor shopping and pharmacy shopping, because that's what we look for.
The other thing is the alteration of prescriptions. When pharmacies look the other way, there's a prescription for 10 pills, and miraculously it turns into 100, and there's no verification or things of that nature. The other thing is the disposition and the destruction of some of these pharmaceuticals. I can't tell you the number of times where there will be a hospice patient or a family member, and the next thing you know, the young person will have people over the house, and the next thing you know, the medicine cabinet is raided or things of that nature. Once their utility is done, they need to be out of the house.
Yes, sir.
So for the two graduates of drug court or soon to be graduate, go back to your high school self, and what would you tell yourself? Because I teach high school students and they're going to watch this. What would you tell them? What would you tell yourself about drinking marijuana? Because I know a lot of times they think I'm nuts for saying marijuana is potentially dangerous. So I want them to hear it from you. And if I'm wrong, what would you tell them?
Guys, could just use the mic too.
All right, sorry. See, this year I had my 10-year anniversary, my 10-year reunion, right? I was so locked and loaded on to be the cool guy. I wanted to be, I was in the jocks, I was in the band, I was in the drama, because I just needed validation from you guys to be cool in my own skin. You know, I need to be comfortable in my own skin, so I needed to be cool with everybody. My 10-year reunion, everybody loved each other. Didn't really matter. What I thought was such a big deal in high school days didn't really matter. The hot girl's ugly now. You know, like the kid that didn't have any girlfriends is Maxim magazine. Like, it doesn't matter.
You needed help for your grief and loss, and you didn't get that.
No, yeah, and to any parents in the room, take that time, man. Take that time. Doesn't matter what happened. If they did, I needed that love. I needed it, and I didn't receive it. And I don't. To this day, I don't blame my family. They have, you know, they had their own lives too, and I had to go through step processes to let go of my resentments and make my amends to people and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I chose. You know, like I smoked the same cigarette you smoked. I smoked the same weed you smoked. I did the same pill that you took, but I just didn't have an off button.
You think you probably weren't also thinking about the consequences, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
So I think that's, listen, I'm no expert, but I think a lot of people, for those reasons, that's what gets you into doing things, right? And maybe if you're the kid who smokes marijuana or whatever it might be, if you couldn't be cool this way, now you're cool. I don't think people think of what that may turn out to, whether they could become addicted. I think a lot of times people think that they can beat something that other people couldn't, right? So hopefully, I think what your students get if they're watching this is that we've talked about the vast array of people and the different personalities and the different walks of life, and you can't beat this. It's not. If you think you're going to start something and be able to turn it off at will, that may not be the case. And so maybe a lesson is watch what you do, right? You know, before you get involved for that first time, it may be harder to turn that off than you ever could imagine.
Mayor, if I could just jump in on one thing. The prosecutor brought up something that I think may have gotten overlooked a little bit. Yeah, I'm sorry, I got to put the mic on.
Your student.
I don't need the mic on the bench, so it doesn't have to worry about it. There is a group called, a program called Project Medicine Drop out there. I don't know if the town has one, whether it be in Borough Hall or wherever, but it might not be a bad idea for the town to look into it. The problem with people, and people who are addicts going into the medicine, into the bathroom and opening up the medicine cabinet and getting things out is a problem. And I think when the prosecutor pointed that out, I think it's actually one thing that people could leave here today and actually do to start to make a little bit of a difference, at least, is to look and see what they have. I noticed when I found out about Project Medicine Drop, I thought for myself, I have a prescription that when I had my tooth pulled that's sitting in my bathroom that I just never threw away. And the wisdom is not to put it down the toilet. That's probably one of the worst things you can do. So.
I just want to make a comment and ask for a question at the same time. My name is Roberto Sayers, and I have a comment for the prosecutor, and I want to congratulate you guys for your success and encourage you to be a mentor, to be a sponsor. A lot of the students that she's talking about are looking for someone that can talk to. As you said, you don't blame your parents. Yeah, that's true. They may not know what you're going through. They figure you'll get over it. I raise kids, so I can tell you about that. In regards to the young lady questions, yes, it comes down to money. From the drug dealer, it represents money. The insurance company, it represents money for them. They don't want to spend money past 28 days. That's why they give them such a hard time. So yes, it do come down to money to that end. Following up on what you were saying to the prosecutor and the judge, the law that require doctors to minimize the number of opioids they prescribe. I read something out there also that there is a recommendation to use the replacement drugs for the opioids, like other drugs that can be used and replaced, instead of giving them the opioids. Is there anything you guys can expand on that? No, not a hospital, like whoever goes to the doctor, a dentist, or you go to a doctor instead of using their surgery.
Just reevaluate. Chris, it's something you mentioned, right? Rather than ultimately just jumping to Percocet or something, right? I remember when I had my wisdom teeth out, I was prescribed, I don't know how many pills it was, I think I took 1 or 2. I think I was like 20 years old. I remember I came home, I was drooling, I didn't know what was going on. Like, you took the 1 or 2, and thank God, I never felt any additional pain. I think maybe I had Tylenol, and that was it. But maybe it's just that it's kind of changing the way, and parents got to be involved. It's got to be, depending on your age, it's got to be you, it's got to be the doctors as well. And look, just because somebody's prescribing you something doesn't mean you got to take it. I think, the prosecutor said, take a Tylenol, take an Advil, and if that doesn't work, maybe you take 2 Tylenols, but before you go, you take some, opioid that's going to be. Yeah.
Because it's funny, because that's what my dentist said you take, what did he tell me? You take which one was it? Tylenol before you go see him, say you get your work done or whatever, and then you take an Advil later on after. And that really kind of helps. The one thing that we tell a lot of our people who have histories of addiction, and a lot of them have, because from lack of self-care, they have terrible teeth. So they're always going to the dentist, and we always say, make sure you let them know you're in recovery. But a lot of times, Motrin 800 is usually the one that's usually the big.
That's what I'm talking about. As a follow-up regarding the marijuana, it goes against my value to legalize marijuana. I work in Trenton, and I have friends who think it's cool, it's okay. One of the things I ask when I say to them, I ask them about what do you think about the legalized marijuana. I'm surprised to hear some people say, whoever's going to do marijuana is going to do marijuana, legal or not. buy into that because from my personal experience, marijuana destroyed my first family. I had to raise my kids by myself because of that. My ex-wife got involved in marijuana, so I'm not a friend of drugs at all. But what do you say to those people? I'm speaking for myself, to those folks that say, legalize marijuana, I'm doing it right now, doesn't bother me, whoever's doing marijuana is going to continue to do it. It's just like drunk driving. If you know you're not supposed to drink and drive, and you drink, whoever's not going to drink and drive is not going to drink and drive. What do you say?
I think the legalization of marijuana is going to turn things into an Easter parade. It's just going to be absolute bedlam. You know, I was at a seminar the other day, and I talked to, asked the Attorney General as to, you know, if you go to a dinner party and ordinarily you would bring a bottle of wine, if you bring a half ounce, and there's going to be a distribution. And there's no answer. And the bottom line is, it's a gateway drug, plain and simple. I think it's indisputable, and more importantly, the number of people that are going to be behind the wheel of a car after doing marijuana. And people can't come at me as a prosecutor and talk about all the young people, that the juvenile brain doesn't mature, that it leads to impulsivity, and so many of these offenses are being committed because of the juvenile brain doesn't fully mature until age of 26. But in the next breath, we're going to allow young people to bombard their brains with marijuana, THC, and spice, and all of the other synthetic forms of marijuana that we have. I'm right now, I have 3 cases on appeal because I'm battling, and I think we talked about this the last time, I'm battling the court system because young people are coming in with marijuana, 14, 15, 16 years old, no prior record, it's automatically being diverted. It's automatically being diverted to a juvenile conference committee, which they do some good work, but there are no services whatsoever at a juvenile conference committee. So if in fact there are a need for services or evaluation or things of that nature, I'm waiting for the 2nd or 3rd time before that child truly gets care. So
I'm surprised with that. I used to, I don't know if I mentioned it before, I used to chair the juvenile conference committee at Piscataway. We never handled drug-related cases. So now they're bringing it to the JCC.
the juvenile conference committee, absolutely. And I have 3 cases because, with all due respect to my brother down at the other end of the table, the judiciary feels that it's more appropriate to handle it there, that there are such creative conditions that can be put in, and it's absolute nonsense.
I mean, I think we're jumping the gun a little bit here. I know we just had an election, but remember, there's one governor-elect that needs to sign whatever the legislature ultimately passes, but there's 120 men and women throughout the state of New Jersey representing me and you that still have to vote on this bill. So, you know, as a mayor and governing body, we can do some things, you know, like pass petitions and resolutions against legalizing this, but don't forget, you're just as powerful, if not more powerful. You put pressure on these people in the legislature and the Senate, and maybe this is, you know, the professionals here as well, in the healthcare industry, that you know, maybe this isn't a foregone conclusion. Just because, you know, somebody takes a poll that, you know, a small, you know, majority of the people we think is a representative sample think we should legalize marijuana, doesn't mean we have to do it, right? So when there are unpopular things in town, you guys don't have any problem giving me a call. So this is probably much more tragic than your street not being plowed. Trust me, this is more tragic, you know, than your street not being plowed. So I would encourage you. You know, we have a senator here in South Plainfield, a resident, but there's, you know, like I said, there's 120, 119 other ones out there. I think if people, you know, become active, and this isn't something that we really want, if we really believe this is the wrong path to go down, I think we got to be more vocal, more active than just saying this is something that's going to happen because some guy who ran for governor, you know, is behind legalizing it. Oh, and by the way, they're going to fund pensions. And you talk about money. This is exactly what this is, right? They've already spent, and they're already figuring out how to push programs, fund pensions, or whatever else it might be for all this revenue that marijuana is going to provide. So you talk about short-sightedness, and you look at the pharmaceutical companies pushing it. This is right in the state of New Jersey. We're trying to solve a revenue problem, which, again, most people, I don't think we have a revenue problem. We're solving what is a state revenue problem by legalizing marijuana. Does that make any sense to anybody?
Yeah, no, my point was more toward, like I said, it goes against my values. And I believe.
I just wanted, before we just make, we get some other people.
I just wanted to ask, there are other states that have legalized
Exactly.
marijuana.
We could take a look at their record as well.
Yeah, so do we have any information about this, you know, what's going on there as a result of legalization, in terms of crime and drug abuse and, you know, crowding jails and rehabs? Is that, has it been a negative, has it had a negative effect criminally and otherwise in Colorado and California and the other states? Do you know anything about that so we can make a comparison, please?
You know, I know there's been some news articles on it, and it's really about a lot of businesses fleeing, and some of these, and I forget exactly where it is. I think it was on NJ.com a couple of days ago. So there is some evidence that it does have a negative impact. I don't know that. I think that Colorado was only a couple of years ago, right? So we're looking at a couple of years of evidence, but yeah, I don't know that we've got enough evidence out there to say 100% that it's going to provide that level. Yeah.
I actually researched it a little bit. I was reading up on Colorado because I was curious what's going to happen here, and I could be wrong, but the way I read it, only 1/3 of the counties in Colorado approved the marijuana distribution. There are studies that are coming out. They were saying that there was it might have been a 300% increase in fatalities, car accidents, things of that nature that people don't really think about that are going to be a trickle-down effect. You know, the other thing that concerns me, and my brother's a police officer, when I spoke to some officers in town, a lot of times the gateway when they're pulling someone over is the marijuana to find other things. And Chris, you could probably elaborate whether it's a weapon or other drugs. If I don't know how it's going to play out if marijuana is legal and you pull someone over and you have the odor or after they're vaping, you know, they have no recourse to search the vehicle for other things, and that may limit their.
I think that's going to be something that has to work its way through the system because, as you indicated, with car accidents, it's not going to be legal to utilize and operate a vehicle under the influence. So that smell, which is what we commonly refer to as a probable cause search, hopefully will still be available to law enforcement.
Mr. Mayor, just to change gears for a second, for any one of the panelists, is there such a thing as an addictive personality?
You've been reading my mind.
Two people subject to the same thing in the same situation. One person ends up with a problem, the other one doesn't. How come? Why? Or is that just a figment of my imagination?
Leave it to professionals, but I would definitely think more people are more prone to addiction than others.
I could certainly try to take that. I mean, that's a multifaceted question, by the way. Remember, it's a biopsychosocial, spiritual type of disease. Are people predisposed? English? Yeah, there's definitely basically it affects people on all different levels. If you use opioids long enough, you're going to become addicted to it. If you use it to that point, it'll start to change your behaviors. Now, are there people that I've spoken with many addicts that believe they were addicts way before they ever picked up a drink or a drug, based on behavior, based on things that they would have looked back now and saw. Like, we know that there's a higher prevalence of people moving on to other drugs the younger they smoke a first cigarette. We know there's prevalence there. We know there's different things that to look for. One of the things we can do to prevent that is be honest, open, talk to your kids, talk to people, you know, the young people in your lives about the reality of drug abuse. I mean, you can't, and offer them a non-judgmental space to come talk to you about anything, you know. But yeah, I mean, there's certain character traits that certainly can lead to a higher instance of addiction. But like I said, addictive drugs are addictive. One of the things we look at when we talk about the opioid addiction and the epidemic and how it got started, actually, if you look back to the very beginning of it, there's an article which we call The Big Mistake, which was an article written in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1980 by a Dr. Jick, who reported out of a study that he had conducted and was involved in that opioids have a very low likelihood of addiction, which was the understatement of the year. He later stated that he regrets writing that article because that's kind of what gave the start to all the push by pharmaceutical companies now. And then there was later a lawsuit against a pharmaceutical company that was successful because, and actually a few of their top executives were prosecuted because of falsifying information as related to OxyContin, which then came along and really kicked the whole thing in gear a little bit later on down the road. 1999 to now, overdoses from opioids have quadrupled, which is per year, which is a huge number. But I went off track a little bit, but I didn't.
I just wanted to say also, we do see when you're talking about, you will see like a lot of people will come in and we'll ask them during their biopsychosocial assessment about their addiction history, and they'll be like, oh, no, everyone else is good, I'm the bad one. And then we'll say, oh, that's the first thing, I'm the bad one, I have the drug problem. But then, when we start talking about other things, there's maybe in the family, maybe not with that person, but there's other addictions. There's gambling addictions, there's food addictions many times, shopping, sex addictions. So many times in early recovery, you will see the substitution of addiction. You will see, what do they call that, guys? 13-stepping? It's very common in the rooms. There's a lot of like
void filling.
Void filling, right? They call it there's anything, whatever it takes. A lot of times it happens sexually. So when that addiction is kicked up, again, a lot of people just think in those terms of alcohol or drugs, but and finally in the DSM-5 we've got the gambling, which is huge as well.
That is so true.
They finally got that in there.
I think.
Just real quick, let me say something. Addictive personality, I can tell you my experience. I'm sure you can agree with the same thing. Yes, I react differently to everything. In recovery, right, so I'm not using drugs, I'm not using alcohol anymore. I went overboard with fishing. Women's usually the first one, womanizing, because I'm taking the void off of my, I'm just trying to not feel anything, so women takes a lot of distraction and it gets me out of myself. Food, I've definitely done food. I stayed away from gambling. One time I went gambling when I just turned 21 and I cleared out my bank account on a slot machine. So I kind of saw that one, like, all right, yeah, I guess I have a gambling problem. One time done. But I'm very active in AA, right? So there's 4 million people in there. Every person in there will say the same exact thing. So there is an addictive personality, and it could be with anything. It just tends to really show itself with drugs and alcohol because they have the most severe consequences right off the bat.
I just wanted to share something. If anybody is dealing with a loved one who has an addiction, a lot of times, I know we did the same thing. If your loved one is addicted and you're thinking you're going to keep them in your home, that they're going to be safe. You're going to take the car keys, you're going to take their car, just so you know, drug dealers deliver. They deliver to your home. So don't fool yourself into a false sense of security thinking that if you take the keys and you have your kid in your house, that's going to keep them from getting the drugs. It's not. So if you have any feeling, then make sure you act upon it.
And with criminal justice reform, we now have electronic monitoring. So our drug addicts stay in and they get delivered sort of with Domino's and their drug dealing.
I just want to also first thank you for sharing your story and helping to break the stigma that this doesn't happen to good people. So thank you. And I think in your son's obituary you did mention And I just want to applaud you for that and every other parent who.
Thank you. We made a conscious decision, my husband and I, that we weren't going to hide it. We put it in the paper and said he died after a battle, terrible battle with addiction. And it opened up so many doors and so many different conversations. And it allowed other people that were dealing with this problem to come to us and talk to somebody. Because it's so important that that the families have the support. You know, the addicts get to go to rehab. When they're in rehab, I mean, you get 28 days of, oh God, they're not going to be dead on the street. But, you know, it's a difficult thing, but thank you.
Yeah, and then a question for the treatment people. Are we seeing increased rates of HIV now due to sharing needles and hepatitis?
More so it would be that over the quite a few years, it's really been the hepatitis C that we've seen. When I first got into the field, I would say it was HIV, then it was both. But now I would say it's really the hepatitis C that we see quite a bit. And what?
Access or staph infections.
Access, yeah.
Yeah, other medical issues.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Just from a curiosity perspective, what is the difference between drug court and organizations such as Carrier?
I think I would answer that. Drug court, people come to me with drug court when they've been convicted or pleading guilty to a crime. Whereas a Carrier, they'll take people, a variety of people from the streets, from a variety of sources, I guess would be the best way to say it.
From a recovery perspective, how do you treat them any different than organizations like Carrier, or is it kind of the same?
Well, we send them to organizations like Carrier as part of what they have to do in our program. Our program is an intense form of probation. So they're not only going to treatment, but they're reporting to a probation officer, to me. They're going to, we require them to go to AANA meetings. There's a lot of things that they have to do, because if not, then they're going to end up in state prison. So there's a big animal that we kind of hold over them.
Yeah, if you remember, I had mentioned earlier the external motivation, which pushes people into treatment, and that's a big part in the monitoring, of drug court, probation. We work with probation officers all the time. We work with drug court, other, families, jobs, employers, EAPs. These are all pieces of the puzzle that push people into treatment, and then we basically will have, like, if a client comes in, they got drug court or probation, we'll have them sign a release so that we can include their probation officer or somebody that they need to get some information to in the treatment process. And sometimes, like I said, they have the option, everybody has a choice. I tell them that all the time. They're like, I'm here, but I don't have any choice. I'm like, you have a choice. Your choice is you can go to jail, or you can be here, or, but there are choices. You don't have to do this right now if you really don't want to. But, my advice is that you do it. And, like I said, it's part of that external motivation. And we try to get them to the point through the treatment process. And all of us could say, through the treatment process, we talk about their values. We talk about all the things that they valued growing up and how they compromise that and how do they push forward. So to try to gain what we call that intrinsic motivation. That motivation is not what I'm running from, what I want. What do I want to gain? Because nobody said at 5 years old, I want to be a dope fiend when I grow up. Nobody said that. Nobody said I want to go use drugs until it puts me into a treatment facility. I don't think anybody has those aspirations, so they obviously had other dreams, and that's what we try to look at. What were your other dreams? Because we want to try to get there.
And to answer your question from a prosecutorial standpoint, whether it's a parent, a defense attorney, or a probation officer, I'm always looking to these people to tell me, what is the plan? What is going to keep this young person from committing another offense? And then I have to then go back, and speaking of gambling addiction, taking a risk and analyzing their prior offenses. So I will take their entire history on my desk, and I'll say, is it institutional offenses where they've committed offenses in the house, the family, domestic, or have they hurt innocent people? And is there a level of violence connected with that offense? And then we try to put together a plan that's going to keep the community protected, as well as getting treatment to the individual. And when the gentleman talked about prison, as he indicated, he can, for the most part, keep them sober while in their institution. I have the unenviable task of dealing with Galway State Prison, which is in Middlesex County. It's always, I don't know if you heard the litigation years ago, because every prison has a different name when it's really, Galway's actually in Woodbridge, and, you know, Annandale is actually so-and-so. I must get 12 institutional complaints on my desk each and every week, whether it's inmates, visitors, or guards. And every orifice possible under the sun is a Pez dispenser in prison. I mean, they're reaching and they're dispensing drugs like Brent took Richmond while in the institution. And some of the ingenuity that's utilized, if it could only be used on Shark Tank as opposed to getting drugs into prison, it's absolutely amazing. And lastly, finally, I was joking at a seminar the other day that I had an ethics complaint filed against me because I was prosecuting this 50-year-old man. And I had indicated that he had stolen the obstetrician stethoscope when he came out of his mother's womb. That's how long he had been stealing. He just wanted a leg up on me, so we filed an ethics complaint. And finally, he did 18 years with a 9-year stip. And probably within less than a year of him being out, I mean, he was the greatest thief there was. I mean, he was up at Home Depot in Watchung with a reciprocating saw on a Cadillac, taking the catalytic converter for the Platinum. I mean, the guy was amazing. And finally I said, hell, the 18 with a 9 didn't work. So I walked into, and I'm sure that the providers will, I walked into Damon House the other day to look for him to say, you know, how he's doing. And they're like, all of the providers came out, we can't acknowledge that he's here. I'm like, I put him here. And he's behind them, waving to me. And I'm like, Bruce, how you making out? He goes, go right, came to see you. And you look like $1 million. So I don't know what's going to work, but sure as hell the 18 with a 9 didn't work.
Anyone else? Oh, back there first.
How long can you go to drug court and then be released and then go back into drug court, or is it like a one-time thing?
Rarely. I mean, there are some people who, I'm sorry, there are people who have gone through a second time, but it's rare, very rare.
Okay. And then what would be the next step? Is it?
If they're committing further crimes? You're saying if they're committing further crimes? State prison, most likely, yeah.
Yep.
I teach at our high school. We have to be creative because when I know somebody has flunked out, I may give them a draconian amount of time, but then reconsider it after a year or two, start the process over, because on a violation of probation, they can get that crazy figure. When on a regular violation of probation, they can only get flat time. And most people that have been in and out of the system, they giggle at flat time. They tell me, correct, I can do that on my head, you know.
I teach at our high school, and I'm not a parent, but I do parent all of your kids while they're there. And one of the reasons I'm here tonight is because probably over the past 3 or 4 years, I've lost about 10 of my former students. And they were my babies, and it's one of the most heart-wrenching things. And I'm glad you brought up the addictive personality, because that's one of the things that I try to talk about in class when they think that marijuana is not a big deal and it's not a gateway to anything. You can't go to your primary doctor and say, hey, can you give me a test to see if I have an addictive personality? Because one person can smoke weed 10, 15, 20 times and it has no effect on them. The next person smokes it one time, and within a couple months it then leads to other things. So I just want to thank you guys for being here, because if there's anything that I can take to the classroom just to give them that little bit of a conversation, my job is done. So thank you.
Yeah, and it's part of the reason I think why we have folks like Nicholas here today, right? Because I can sit up and, as stunning as the prosecutor is, I don't think we get as a compliment.
What about the street being cloud?
I told you, your street being cloud is not that important. We can talk to kids, you can talk to kids. I don't think the kids are going to get it, but when they see the people that are closer to their age, that are going through the things that have gone through the things that they're going through, and the problems that they had where they thought they wouldn't be affected or they could beat it, I think that kind of brings home the message, you know, to the younger kids a lot more. So while we love to have the professionals here and the esteemed judge, it is the folks, it's the parents that have gone through this, it's the recovering addicts, the success stories, but the people who felt that pain and lived through it, I think that can tell a story that gets home to people a little bit more than we could have.
And if I can give you one other thought, there is available online an interactive map of the state of New Jersey, and it shows for 2016 all the overdose deaths. And you can click on it, and I've actually gone to South Plainfield and looked at South Plainfield. You can click on it and they give you information, the person's age, what happened. It's not identifiable information, but I think maybe for our class it might kind of bring home the fact that this is happening right here and see the numbers of people involved. I think if you just Google it, you should be able to find it.
It's on NJ.com as well. If you even if you just search heroin town, it's one of the articles that'll come up, but I've looked at that and I can.
How do we get you guys in the high school?
As far as the high school comment, and as scary as it may be, I delivered some toiletries to my son at Rutgers this morning. And I guess, you know, everyone thinks that, you know, it's a drug deal because I stopped and I hand him his ad. He comes out on Bishop and we're sitting there talking. And I said, you know, Caleb, I got a phone call last night for some assistance because, you know, so-and-so was arrested. And he looks at me and goes, yeah, that's not unexpected. And I'm like, Caleb, he's been in my house. And I look at him and he goes, Dad, he goes, if I didn't bring home everyone that I know that was smoking pot or using drugs, I would be a very lonely young man. And that was a conversation that I had at 9 o'clock this morning based upon a phone call I got from a disturbed parent last night struggling with what they're going to do. And you know, so that's the constant communication that we need to try to deal with, you know, because Dad, what do you want me to do, just walk out? I'm like, yeah, that's a start. And the struggle that he's dealing with.
Hey, guys, how do we get you in high school? How do we get you one-on-one talking to the kids?
Ask, I'll come any day.
And that's a good segue to bring up, you know, just something local in our wonderful hometown here of South Plainfield. There is 12-step fellowship recovery meetings right here in our hometown. You just have to go on the meeting finder to find them. And all are welcome if they're an open meeting.
Anyone else?
Can I just say something real quick?
Yeah, why don't we just start with you guys at the end. I'll give you a minute if you want to say any final words to everybody, any kind of parting advice or anything, you know, your thoughts about today. Again, we look to do this again probably within 6 months or so, if not a year. But before I turn it over to you guys, I just want to thank you guys for taking time out of your day, and every one of you. We couldn't do this without you, and I think this is extremely important, and it's something that the more you drive this message home, hopefully that should help. You don't know exactly, it's hard to quantify what a program like tonight, what kind of dividends that may have, but to me, I think it's worth it. For everyone that attended, and hopefully anybody who watches on home, again, take it away. We've talked about it a number of times. You can't, if you think you can, you know, start, if your kids think you can start with opioids or marijuana or alcohol, they're going to beat the odds. They're probably not. You probably know somebody that's dealing with this, and even though you may not realize it, chances are you have. It touches everybody. So again, thanks for coming out, and we'll start with you down there. Just you can keep it to a minute. We'll get everybody home, and thanks for your attendance.
Yeah, just real quick, if you want us to come speak at a school, if you want me to come speak at a school, if you have anybody that you love or know and they're struggling and you don't know what else to do, I'll be happy to give you my phone number. Talking and interacting with other people that are struggling keeps me sober, and it keeps me clean, and I've never once, left a speaking commitment feeling bad, and I always feel better. And like this gentleman said, I mean, the 12-step programs are abundant in this area, and I know a bunch of them, and I'd be happy to, do whatever I can. So get with me after we close up here. Thank you. Thanks for all your time.
So yeah, again, thank you and I'm honored that you guys asked me to come. And if you guys take anything at all, I just want to like everybody's reading papers, everybody's got documents. Being an addict, this is the most powerful thing I've ever read. An addict fell in a hole and couldn't get out. A businessman went by, the addict called out for help. The businessman threw him some money and told him to buy a ladder, but the addict couldn't find a ladder in his hole. A doctor walked by the addict, said, "It helped, I can't get out." The doctor gave him some drugs and said, "Take this, it will relieve some pain." The addict said thanks, but the pills ran out and he was still in a hole. A renowned psychiatrist rode by and heard the addict's cries for help. He stopped and said, "How did you get in there? Where were you born? Did your parents put you there? Tell me about yourself." So the addict talked to him for a few hours and the psychiatrist had to leave, but he said he'll be back next week. The addict thanked him, but he was still in the hole. A priest came by and heard the addict calling for help. The priest gave him a Bible and said, "I'll pray for you." The priest got down on his knees and prayed for the addict and left. The addict was very grateful and he read the whole Bible, but he was still stuck in his hole. A recovering addict happened to pass by. The addict cried out, "Hey, help me. I'm stuck in this hole." Right away, the recovering addict jumped in the hole with him. The addict said, "What are you doing? Now we're both stuck in here." But the recovering addict said, "It's okay. I've been here before. I know the way out."
The last thing I would say is just a piece of advice for parents out there. If something happens, if you're concerned about your children and you think that something may be going on, don't look away. Don't think it's going to go away. I get to see, just like Prosecutor Kubright did, people's backgrounds, people's histories, and those include their histories with drug and alcohol use. And it starts at young ages, and I can't comment on pending legislation, but as part of my role I'm not allowed to, but I see it starts out alcohol, marijuana, moves on to something else and progresses. So my suggestion is, and I've only been in drug court since May, I was in family court before that, but my limited view of seeing it is don't turn away, don't think it's going to go away on its own. You need to get them help.
All right. Just wanted to say thank you for inviting me. Absolutely a pleasure to talk about this topic and try to educate as much as we possibly can at what's out there, what we can provide, and what it's been a pleasure talking on this panel as well. Just wanted to cap it off with a couple things. As you brought up the personality piece, I thought of something a little bit later, and I just wanted to kind of go into it real quick. Is families with addiction history in them, children are 4 times more likely to become addicted themselves. So just to give you that, a lot of times we find there's a lot of correlation. Even if they come in and say, "No, I don't have anybody that's addicted in my family," we find this uncle somewhere down the line that has some type of addiction issue. Family support, as the judge was just saying, is extremely important. There's a group called Parent Support Group of New Jersey. So if anybody needs help coping with a son or daughter's addiction issue, they're a great group of people. They do actually do a meeting at Carrier Clinic every Monday, but they're statewide. So all you got to do is find them on the web, and they'll help you out. We also have a group called Bright Futures for Kids, which is a master's level therapist. Every Sunday comes to Carrier, and kids ages 4 to 12. We might think they're not affected by what's going on in the house, but they absolutely are. So, sometimes the most affected are the smallest ones in the household. So we want to make sure we treat them as well. And that's all I got. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank everyone. I wanted to thank you for inviting me. And also, I just wanted to say that the 2 gentlemen at the end, they're the reason why we go to work every day. Those of us in the field.
It'll make my day when I go and run group tomorrow and somebody gives me a hard time.
Think of this.
I just wanted to say for, everyone who's in like the school setting and working with high school kids that a lot of the adolescents I work with, I often tell them, you show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Because as much as you don't think about it, if your friends are using and they're getting arrested and they're, having problems in their life, what kind of choices are you making? Are you following them down the same path, or are you creating your own? And also at JFK, we do offer family support as well as co-occurring and addiction services. So it's something else to think of. Thank you for having us.
I want to thank you for having this tonight. It's just so very important. I just want to say the most important thing to me is to say that my son was Tommy Doyen, and he was a great person with a terrible disease. And please remember that when you're dealing with an addict. They don't want to be an addict, but they are. So please show them the respect that they deserve as a person. Thank you.
You're loud, but...
Just to echo the sentiments, thank you very much for having us. But one of the things, and not to be a killjoy to the mayor, but where do we go from here? I said it the last time we were here, we need a program, the gentleman mentioned, to get into the schools. I constantly run programs, diversionary programs, and I call it great things for little or no money. You can put together a very powerful program that can be utilized with some of our drug court graduates. I have driving investigators, fatality investigators that will come and talk to our young people, and defendants from 16 all the way up to 60 that could come and speak to young people to talk about their experiences in institutions and struggling with the disease of addiction. And the one thing that I tell our family court judges when I deal with young people and even young adults is that a child that we jailed is a child that we failed. And I think we all need to remember that and to identify the issues early on and provide the treatment that's necessary before then some big bad prosecutor has to say it's enough and it's time to go to jail. And I thank you.
Thank you.
Not a big fan. So we do have some Board of Education members. I would, again, I have twin boys in 16 years old in high school. I welcome anything that our Board of Education members that are here would bring into the school. I think these two gentlemen would be excellent. Often the feedback you hear, unfortunately, from these programs, if you get people like me in front of them, not the prosecutor, he might be a little bit better, they're not going to respond to us. They want to hear from people that are closer to their age, that have gone through this and have done. So please, these gentlemen are willing and able. Let's get them in the schools. And to the prosecutor, let's come up with, we'll lean on you and your expertise, whatever other programs we want. I think it's important. Again, whether we get a ton of people that come out or whether we get a handful, we do have the power of being able to tape these and televise them and just make them available on different mediums. So again, thank you for all for coming out. Thank you guys for coming out, and have a good night.